Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in our construction and major renovation. We will be presenting the pre-planning session today. We are absolutely grateful that you're able to join us. So as we are giving everyone a few more minutes to logging in and so forth, we just want to say welcome.
Good afternoon, Ms. Fragua.
Hey, good afternoon. Good to hear your voice. That's what we like. We want to hear all your voices. So those of you are able to speak to us over the line through Zoom, that would be so awesome. Great to hear voices.
Medeweka.
Carolyn, yeah,
It's Carolyn from Comanche Nation.
This is Tom from Big Sandy Rancheria.
Hi, Tom. Welcome.
Thank you.
Again, welcome everyone. Give a couple more minutes, few seconds here, get everyone to join and get comfortable. We just want to say welcome to the construction major renovation. We will talk about pre-planning during this session. All right, as everyone is still continuing to join, I would just like to talk through some Zoom logistics here for our webinar. If you need technical support during this session, you can post that in the chat box, which can be accessed by clicking the chat button in the menu on the bottom of the Zoom window. The training specialist on the call will support you in resolving any technical issues that you might be having. We know many of you are at home, so you might have others in the family using the internet in the house. This meeting will run smoothly for you if you have strong internet connection. So just a tip for stronger internet is to move closer to your router or to use the Ethernet connection attached directly to your router or your modem. Now we want to quickly point out some useful features here in Zoom that will come in handy while you watch the presentation. First, that we ask that you stay muted when you are not talking. We will be muted when you join any meeting, but if you need to mute or unmute yourself, just click the mute button in the bottom left side of the screen. You'll also see the button to toggle your video screen there as well. And if you don't see the icons, move your cursors over to the Zoom window and they will appear. We do recommend watching the event in speaker view. But if you would like to see more people in the event, you can switch over to gallery view. Change views by clicking the views button in the top right portion of the Zoom screen. Next is the participant panel. The button is located at the bottom of the Zoom screen. In the participant panel, you can raise your hand, say yes or no, and other types of feedback that may be used during this session. Next is our chat window. As mentioned, the chat button is located to the right of the participant button. In the chat panel, you can write comments or ask questions that will definitely be relayed to our session here. We have a few supports within our session that will be helping and assisting with chats. If you are on the phone, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6 and re-mute yourself with the same number, *6, and then press *9 to raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. So great, welcome again. We just ask that you introduce yourself, as many of you have done so in the chat box by sharing your name and tribal CCDF program that you are representing. Appreciate that very much. I know we did ask you to register, but still great to see how many have joined us today. So we appreciate that as well. And that also is helpful to kind of get you to practice in Zoom using the chat box and typing again your name and the program you are representing. So appreciate everyone already doing that. Good afternoon, Yate. So kind of just thinking through some ideas of what brought you to today's session, just keeping in mind what did bring me here. We just ask that you have some paper, pen. This information around this session is going to be available for our participants. You will receive information receiving this information, but still just jotting down some questions, some ideas and thoughts that might come to your mind is very helpful. So let me introduce myself. My name is Dolores Frawa. I go by Dee. Technical assistance for Region 6. So I'm representing the Tribal Center as well as my other colleagues that are here to assist and support. I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Shah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shar Shank, and I'm a TA specialist with the Tribal Center as well. And I'm a TA specialist for Region 7, 8, and filling in 10 as well. Melody?
Eonde Batson, Ki Onde Da. This is Melody Redbird Coast. I'm the director of the National Center on Tribal Early Childhood Development, and I also serve as a TA specialist in Region 1. And it's really good to see all of you here today. Back to you, Dee.
Awesome, thank you, everyone. I would like to see if we have our OCC, Jim. Are you in the?
Hello.
Hi, Jim.
Welcome. I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who has joined the Zoom meeting to hear about some of the pre-planning requirements. Over the last few years, we've had a number of tribes submit partial applications for construction, but what we've found is many folks jump the pre-planning stage. So we're hoping that this session will be able to do a deep dive in what you can do, how you can spend your money on the pre-planning. And I think one message we want to let everybody know is that construction is not the immediate go-to. You know, you actually have to have a plan on what you're going to be doing. A lot of times in the past, we would get a partial application that says, okay, we're going to do construction because we want to obligate the funds. And then 3 years later, we still don't have a complete application. So be mindful of that time frame. Even though there is not a deadline when you have to have everything complete, you just need to be mindful of that time frame because you have up to 3 years to liquidate that. And ask your questions. And if you want to type those questions in the chat, that'll be great because this is being recorded, I believe, Dee, and we will go back and follow up as needed. So again, ask your questions and look forward to having you all attend our second session, which I believe is on June 2nd, where we actually do a deep dive into the application. So again, feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, and we look forward to seeing your complete application later this year. Back to Dee.
All right, thank you, Jim. Well, here on the screen, we just want to mention some learning objectives that we would like to have all of you that are participating in today's session to understand the pre-planning activities, the processes before completing the construction or the major renovation application. Also be able to assess the communities that is unique childcare needs, what the community needs and their unique childcare needs, including the environment and opportunities to incorporate cultural and linguistic elements. Engage in discussion with peers to explore available options of their program. So if you have an example that you would like your peer to hear, this is a great place to also talk about that. Submit the supplemental written application for construction or major renovation. So be in preparation for that. Next. Here we have the tribal construction process flowchart of the construction major application process. The first column, you'll see a list of activities that grantees should consider before deciding to set aside funds for construction or major renovation project. We have here review the program instructions, which is the PI. Pre-application activities such as coming in and listening into our pre-planning session to get some thoughts beforehand and thinking it through strategically, planning costs, learning about your internal and external partners that could definitely be a support to you, as well as contacting your regional program specialists and having that great communication, as well as your during. During the session, we will also, here on the column, the second column is during. We want to make sure you submit your pre-application by July 1st of 2021. And also to remember to have that full complete application if it is ready by then, to make sure that is available as well. And then your partial application, ensuring that your tribal leader does provide their signature for that, and knowing and understanding what's going to be set aside, what funding you're going to set aside, identifying whether it's going to be mandatory or discretionary, and then the complete application. Here in the third row is after. It's your application, pre-application that's being received. The OCC reviews that application, reads through it, as well as you'll possibly get your notice of grant award letter. Also, any approvals of the project should be provided to you after this part of the process flow chart on after. And also the tribal begins their project once they've been approved, as well as completing and preparing for that reporting requirement. So just a really quick flow of the process flow chart. So here we will begin with before and getting started. And this is part of, again, the flow chart on the before section. The step is to review the program instruction, also to know what the program instruction entails and what is all involved in completing that full application. We would like to provide the program instructions here on this slide. The CCDB JAC allows tribal lead agencies to use CCDF funds for construction or major renovation of childcare facilities. It is definitely important that tribal lead agencies review this program instruction as they begin to consider a construction or a major renovation project. On the screen, you'll see a screenshot of the most current instruction, as well as a link to navigate to this document. Tribes with an approved plan under Public Law 102-477 would also request and receive ACF approval in accordance with this program instruction prior to spending CCF funds on construction major renovation projects. This document will provide you essential information on the process to set aside CCF funds and the components of completing that construction and major renovation application. Thanks. To help us better understand where your tribal lead agency is applying for construction major renovation, let's participate in a couple of poll questions. Have you read the current tribal construction major renovation program instruction? The next one is, have you started any pre-application activities? Great. It's going back and forth, almost 50-50. Everyone's either read the program instructions and no and yes, no and yes. So I think it's really good to know that many of you are looking at the program instruction, because again, that is where all the information, what needs to be involved in the full application, as well as some pre-planning activities that can take place. And then if you've started pre-application activities, that is so awesome. And I see a majority of you have started that. So that's great to hear. I'm so glad that you all are doing this, and this is going to be very helpful for you in the long run. And thank you for participating in our poll question. I will go ahead and now turn this over to Melody to take us on to our next few slides.
Awesome. Thank you, Dee. And let's see, I see we have some questions in the chat box, so we will be following up with you. So be on the lookout in the chat for those of you that are asking questions. So now let's go on to the next item in the flow chart, and that is the pre-application activities. So this is where tribal lead agencies will determine planning costs and who will be your internal and external partners in developing your plan for updating childcare facilities as part of your construction or major renovation projects. So to illustrate the planning process, we'll be using the Tribal Childcare Management Systems Framework that was first introduced during the Tribal Management Institute in 2019 and updated and revisited during the virtual Tribal State and Territory Administrators meeting in 2020. So on the screen, you'll see a visual representation of the management systems that are involved in operating your tribal CCDF program. We'll walk through each of the systems within this framework, identifying the information needed for planning, construction, major renovation projects. And we're going to frame our discussions around the various parts of this framework in order to help you make the connections on how your construction and major renovation projects fit within the framework. So first, we're going to start by looking at the outer ring, which is leadership and coordination. So this is where the CCDF administrator cooperates, coordinates, and collaborates with tribal leadership, as well as with internal and external partners to begin the preliminary planning process for minor renovation, construction, or major renovation projects. Next slide. All right, so as you begin to think about partners for cooperation, coordination, and collaboration, think about the internal partners. So those departments or programs that are within your tribe, within your tribal organization, your tribal nation structure to support your project. So let's think a little bit about that. So here are some potential partners to consider. You might want to think about partnering with your tribal land department. They might be able to help identify possible buildings for renovation or possible building sites. Next, you might think about coordinating with your tribal planning or development department. They might be able to help identify any additional resources. Or you might reach out to your tribal environmental department. They might be able to help locate prior environmental reviews for the buildings for renovation or for possible building sites in your service area. Or they might help identify a contractor that they could use for environmental surveys that might be recommended. And then you could also coordinate with other tribal programs. So for example, Head Start, Early Head Start, local schools, your tribal TANF, Indian Health Service, or elder or AOA programs in your community in order to see if they might be interested in sharing or renting space from the CCDF program in your new facility. You might also think about your tribal maintenance, property or procurement departments, and so on. So in addition to these internal partners, you might want to think about external partners, such as a local agency that can assist in conducting environmental studies, or someone that can help create architectural drawings for the project. Gathering the key partners at the beginning of the planning process can help the process go much faster. So we wanted to take a quick minute to have you think about this question. Based on our conversation around coordination, cooperation, or collaboration, who could assist you in the planning and development of your construction or major renovation project? So remember that your answer could be either an internal or an external partner. So if you could take a second, we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. Please type your responses and your ideas into the chat box. All right, I see some of you are responding. I see we have environmental department, planning department. We have officer who has experience as a project manager, tribal land department, community development planning, housing department. These are awesome ideas. So hopefully those of you can see in the chat box, these are some wonderful ideas of both departments or programs within your tribal nation that you could reach out to and collaborate as you start this planning process. And I see that you have, there's a question on working with the housing authority that receives, and I'm not sure how to say that acronym, but receives funds. So we definitely encourage you to identify partners that you can coordinate and collaborate with. It's definitely something to think about. We're going to talk a little bit about partnering and cost allocation planning here in a little bit. But that's definitely something to consider, is if you have resources already available, maybe there's already, some tribes have community development grants or USDA grants. You could certainly leverage those resources and think about how CCDF funds can support those projects as well. Great question. So let's see here. And we did want to mention, so since we're thinking about partnerships, I really appreciate all of you sharing all your ideas. So one crucial part of any collaboration is communication. And so we wanted to mention that communication with your Office of Child Care regional office is really crucial. Your regional program specialist can be an important part of your planning team. So remember to discuss with your regional office if you're considering construction or major renovation projects. So it's really important, if you're even thinking about this idea, you're like, hey, I'm thinking about this funding, reach out to your program specialist because they are going to be really helpful to you. And I also wanted to mention that if you have an approved plan under the Public Law 102477, you also need to communicate with your regional office if you're considering construction or major renovation projects, and that is in accordance with the Office of Child Care Program instruction. So next slide. A tribal lead agency must involve its Office of Child Care regional office early in the process. So now's a good time, if you haven't already, to reach out to your program specialist and let them know that you're considering construction or major renovation. And it's really important to discuss with your program specialist these ideas that you have for your project prior to submitting a written application. We did want to note that tribal lead agencies can expend funds for minor renovation without requesting approval. And we're going to go over what the differences are later on in this presentation. All right, so now that we've talked about the outer ring, we're going to move to the third ring of the framework. And these are the 12 internal management systems. The first system we want to talk about is community needs assessment. So this system involves the ways in which the tribal lead agency determines the tribal community's child care needs. The community needs assessment process, which is guided by the CCDF administrator, provides information that can be used to inform your CCDF program planning and decision-making. Through an effective community needs assessment system, the CCDF administrator can identify the need for updating child care facilities in your service area. And here on the slide, we have some guiding questions to help you think about this process in your CCDF program. So these questions are, have you conducted a community needs assessment? And does our community needs assessment warrant a construction or major renovation application? So have you identified a need for updating any of your childcare facilities? Or maybe have you identified a need for expanding your childcare services and constructing new facilities? Next slide. So before submitting your application for construction or major renovation in accordance with the program instruction, tribal CCDF grantees must conduct a community needs assessment in order to determine the need for construction or major renovation. So currently, there's no template or specific format for the content of the needs assessment. So it's basically, you want to just make sure that that needs assessment is able to, and if there's a need to construct or renovate a childcare facility, and if there is a need, how can that facility be developed in a manner that best meets your tribal community's needs? So these community needs assessments are an essential first step in the planning process, and they also involve critical stakeholders and partners. So those partners that you identified, you want to make sure that they're also involved in your community needs assessment process, because they're all going to be part of this project for your community. And I see we have some questions here. So yes, the needs assessment is a required component, because that's pretty much where you're going to be able to determine whether or not you need to construct a new facility or if you need to renovate an existing facility. So that needs assessment is going to pretty much help you plan out what those needs are. And I know that these are some, everyone probably has a lot of questions about this, and I know this is a lot of information, but keep asking the questions. And I just wanted to make a note that you might have seen in the announcement for this webinar. There is a follow-up webinar, like Jim mentioned, that will happen in a couple weeks that will go over the application process itself. But we're also going to be offering construction and major renovation office hours in the month of June. So that'll be a good opportunity to kind of think through some of these questions that you have. So keep the questions coming, but also know that this isn't the only opportunity to ask questions. We're going to have office hours as well. So definitely make note of any questions that you're thinking of. So this is good. So a little more about the community needs assessment process. So there are instances where other tribal organizations or departments in your tribe, they might have already conducted some type of community assessment. One good example is your tribal Head Start program. Head Start is required to do a community assessment, and they might be able to provide your CCDF program with the information or data from that community assessment that can help inform your CCDF program's community needs assessment for construction. So if you are able to gather additional needs assessments from other tribal departments or programs within your tribe, you can certainly use that information for your construction or major renovation application. And you want to just ensure that if, for instance, if your Head Start program did already conduct a needs assessment, you want to make sure that that information or the report or the data, it does indicate that there is a need for expanding childcare services that might warrant either constructing a new facility or renovating an existing facility. So what exactly does this needs assessment process involve? So first, you'll want to assess the condition and adequacy of existing facilities. You'll want to examine the current need for childcare in your community. So that includes your population demographics, what type of childcare meets the needs in the community. So you'll want to think about how many children and the different age groups of children that are already served by programs in your community. And then what types of providers? So do you have center-based facilities in your service area? Do you have family childcare, home providers in your service area? That type of thing. Your needs assessment will also involve projecting whether the need for childcare is likely to continue or change in the future. So a needs assessment is going to help you determine if there are any changes or shifts in your population, in the demographic. So maybe in the past 10 years, you've seen an influx of families moving or relocating to a certain town or a certain part of your service area. Or maybe they're moving out of a certain town and now there's not such a big need in that area. But now in this other part of your service area, there is a larger need for childcare. So those are the type of information that you'll want to gather from your community needs assessment. This needs assessment is also going to help you determine the best location for your proposed facilities, as well as evaluating the proposed site. So looking at the lands that are available for your proposed facilities. You'll also be able to determine the size of the facility based on those community needs and available resources. And you'll also be able to estimate startup costs and operating costs for the facility and evaluate whether adequate resources exist to meet those costs. So your community needs assessment is really important, and it's going to pull together all those necessary pieces of information so that you can make an informed decision as you're planning out your construction or major renovation projects. And don't worry, there is definitely more information available on planning activities and requirements for the needs assessment. And that is found in the program instruction that Dee mentioned a little bit ago. And you can look in section 4 for specific details on the community needs assessment. So next slide. So some of the necessary information during the construction and major renovation application process, tribal aid agencies must provide a description of existing childcare facilities located within a 50-mile radius of the proposed facility. And this description includes existing facilities that are currently used by the tribal aid agency to carry out CCDF activities. And so you'll want to include the number of each type of facility, like we talked about homes and centers, how many homes and centers are there, as well as a brief description of each center. So the size of the center, the type of structure, which is whether it's a full construction or if it's a modular building that already exists, what condition it's in, the number of children that that center serves, and the ages of children served. And all of this information is things that you would be able to gather during your community assessment process. So I know that I saw a lot of questions coming in, and we definitely want to be able to support you with these questions. So we are making a note of these. And we hope to be able to follow up with you on these questions during the office hours, as well as in the next webinar that we have. So keep your questions coming because this is really helpful. And we encourage you to attend our the office hours because then we can talk a little bit more in detail about some of these items. So great questions. Okay, so let's go into the next system. The next system is the Program Administration and Data Evaluation System. And within this system, you could ask yourself, who will monitor this construction or major renovation project in order to ensure program integrity and accountability? And who will be the point of contact for the construction or major renovation project at the program level? Other considerations would be to look at program data like your ACF 700 report or your monthly or annual program data reports. See how many children you're currently serving for direct services. And you could also take a look at your ACF 696T report or your monthly, quarterly, or annual financial reports in order to see how much money you're spending on direct services or how much money might need to be obligated and liquidated from each funding year for your proposed construction or major renovation project. Tribal lead agencies with small allocation sizes might want to consider identifying funds for construction or major renovation due to the increased amounts of funding. And insights gathered from all of this information could be very valuable in your planning process. And so with that, to take us through the next system, I'm going to turn it over to Shar.
Thanks, Melody. So we're going to look at provider settings now. This system includes the ways in which a tribal lead agency supports child care providers who deliver direct services to eligible children. In thinking about your provider types, you could ask yourself these questions. Do we currently operate a tribally operated center? If yes, are the facilities large enough to accommodate all of the children who are eligible to receive services? If no, would the new tribally operated center that you're thinking about constructing replace current certificate providers, or would it accommodate additional children who might be eligible? Other considerations around provider settings is how many staff would need to be hired to work at the new facility, and how would you begin possibly recruiting staff? All of these decisions play a critical role in planning. Additional considerations around facilities are to include in your construction and major renovation application are adequate facilities not otherwise available. This is something that you could find out in your community assessment. Is there a lack of such facilities that inhibit the operation of child care programs in the future? So maybe thinking about some future planning, maybe planning for growth in the future. Would the use of CCDF funds for construction or major renovation result in a decrease in the level of child care services provided? We want to note that the CCDF final rule specifies that this requirement can be waived if this decrease is temporary and that the grantee demonstrates that construction or renovation will increase the level of direct services or the quality of services. The next system within the framework is the Health and Safety Monitoring System, which includes monitoring provider settings. The monitoring reports of your current tribally operated center or providers could give you valuable information as to the current condition of your child care facilities. You could ask your monitors, based on our monitoring report, is our current facility safe for the children and staff? Data gathered from your monitoring reports could give you the answer you need. Another very important health and safety question to ask during the planning process is the proposed location for a child care facility safe from environmental hazards? This question will need to be answered by completing an environmental assessment of the proposed location. So let's move to the next slide and talk more about that assessment. An environmental assessment is a part of the complete construction and major renovation application. It's item number 18 on the checklist. In the pre-planning stage, this would be an assessment that the CCDF program could consider starting well in advance. Tribal lead agencies must provide an assessment of the impact of the proposed construction or renovation on the human environment, addressing in particular any significant change in land use. For example, substantial increases in traffic in the surrounding area due to the provision of transportation services. Pursuant to the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 and Attachment B of the program instruction, it will provide additional information on these requirements. Tribal lead agencies must provide a report showing the results of tests for environmental hazards present in the facility, groundwater, and soil, or justification why such testing is not necessary. The report or justification is required regardless of whether or not the tribal lead agency is required to submit a complete environmental assessment in accordance with DEPA. So let's take a moment for you to share who will assist you in carrying out your environmental assessment. You could think back to our previous discussion on possible partners in cooperation, coordination, and collaboration to assist you in sharing. So you could enter your responses into the chat box. I see Tara said her tribal environmental department. Definitely a good place to start. Sometimes in tribal communities, pieces of land have already had an environmental assessment. So you could check with some of your tribal departments to see if that there is one in existence already. We also have the Realty Department, the State of Nevada Environmental Agency, your local chapter or community, land and environmental departments within your tribe. Many times they have different names within the tribe, but usually there's a planning department or a lands department. So definitely check with them. All right, thank you for responses, and we're going to move on to the continuous quality improvement section. The continuous quality improvement system involves the development of goals, action steps, and implementation of quality activities to effectively improve the quality of childcare for children and families served, and use the 10 approved quality activities listed in the tribal CCDF plan. A question to consider is, could the health and safety issues in childcare facilities be solved with a minor renovation project using quality dollars? We're going to talk a little bit more about quality and examples of minor renovations in the next few slides. So as we said, quality dollars may be used for minor renovations. Quality care includes a safe and healthy environment, a place where children will develop and flourish. Quality care is associated with higher language, academic, and social skills, and fewer behavior problems. And as you can see on the chart to the right, this is just a reminder, tribes of all allocation sizes are required to spend 8% of their discretionary funds on quality activities in fiscal year 2021 and 9% in fiscal year 2022 and beyond. Tribes with medium and large allocation sizes are required to spend an additional 3% on infant and toddler initiatives. So for example, if a tribe with a medium allocation wanted to do minor renovations to an existing space to make it age appropriate to serve infants and toddlers, those expenditures could go towards their infant and toddler quality spending requirement. Remember that tribes with small allocations are not required to spend on infant and toddler initiatives, but they can certainly do so if they want to, and if they chose that activity in their plan. Another example would be if a small allocation grantee wanted to update the bathrooms within their preschool age facility, they could charge those expenditures to their regular quality spending requirement. Okay, next slide. Minor renovations includes all renovations other than major renovation or construction. Here are some pictures of an updated kitchen, an updated bathroom, and an updated classroom through minor renovation projects using quality dollars. If you have any questions, feel free to enter your questions in the chat, and we will try to address them by the end of the session or in the follow-up email. On the screen are some additional examples of minor renovation projects using quality dollars. For example, you could replace a carpet with floor tile as a result of a monitoring review. You could upgrade the kitchen to add safe electrical outlets and fix plumbing fixtures. Replace cabinets with adequate storage space for children's personal belongings. Updating a sidewalk to provide a safe pathway for children coming and going into the program. Installing safety features on a playground. A lot of different ideas that are considered minor renovation.
Shar, this is Dee.
Mhm.
I
Hi.
just want to also include some of the COVID pieces,
Okay.
renovations. So there's a few items that we need to mention is the motionless hand sanitizer installation, those type of things that have to do with COVID is also considered minor renovation. Thank you.
Thanks, Dee. Definitely great ideas. So moving on to disaster preparedness and response. This system includes developing and implementing a disaster preparedness and response plan for the tribe's service area. And during your planning, you may want to consider how your facility will be updated or built to prepare for unknown disasters. The tribal lead agency should consider how the needs of the children, including the need for safe childcare before, during, and after a state of emergency is declared, is maintained when thinking about building design. Next slide. Some design considerations for disaster preparedness and response are, will you have exits directly from each classroom to the outside of the building? Will you have limited entry points from the public? Is the facility structured for emergency situations or disasters? Will this facility accommodate isolation rooms for children that may become sick? Will you want to add a ventilation system? There are many other considerations based on your geographical locations. Best practice would be to brainstorm with your planning committee on any adjustments to the design that might be needed. Again, if you have questions, please enter them into the chat. All right. Moving on to the training and professional development system. Within this system, tribal lead agencies may consider adding space to accommodate training and professional development activities for the staff and other providers to the design of the facility. You may also want to begin thinking about future staff members for the facility. It's never too late to begin to recruit some recruitment efforts or partnering with local colleges to help train professional potential candidates for your new center. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dee and monitor the chat.
Thank you, Shar. That was a great information. And thank you for sharing that around quality and the activities around that. So next here on the construction and process flow chart, we have contact your regional program specialist. We just want to make sure that in their next steps of processing to always make sure you contact your regional program specialist because they are very important. It's a very important planning step and also part of our communication system. The communication system involves the way in which the CCDF administrator communicates effectively with both internal and external stakeholders. And those are individuals such as many of you have mentioned your Head Start and your early Head Start programs. Those are what we call other stakeholders as well. The system includes building partnerships through cooperation, coordination, and collaboration. We're talking about communication. So working with tribal leaders and effectively engaging your internal and external stakeholders. How will you communicate with the Office of Child Care of your updates to your child care facility? How will you gather community input for your project? As mentioned earlier, when we were talking about community needs assessment, that is definitely a great way for communication. Do you all know who your regional office contacts are? That is also a great piece to know who you are to be contacting. Next. Here we have a reference of all the regional office contacts. If you have not, if you don't have a contact information, here we do have one. It is included in our presentation slide, and information around today's session will follow up in an email. Moving along under communication processes, we would like to talk about 102-477 tribes. Grantees with approved 102-477 complete the same application request in order to use CCDF funds for construction and renovation. There are two key differences related to application processes for our 102-477 grantees. ACF will notify the U.S. Department of Interior upon approving your 102-477 grantees construction or major renovation application. Secondly, the grantees with approved plans under 102-477 cannot use CCF funds for construction or renovation until the Department of Interior notifies the grantee that the scope of work has been modified to include the approved construction and major renovation project. Moving on to human resources system within your tribe. Do you have staff capacity to manage a construction or major renovation project? A project of this nature requires a lot of staff input and time. Tribal lead agencies may want to plan on adding additional staff to assist in taking on some of the burden of a CCF administrator during this period, or you could hire a consultant to manage more of the day-to-day construction or major renovation activities. If you choose to hire a consultant to assist in planning processing, it is up to the tribe to determine the necessary qualification of the consultant, keeping in mind that someone with experience in designing and building childcare facilities would be best practices. Direct services system is one of the most important systems to involve in planning. Within this system, you will determine the number of eligible children currently serving, children who are in the wait list, and the need for additional provider settings. Some of the questions you could ask are, do we have the capacity to serve all the children who qualify for services? Do we have enough money to continue subsidy services while we set aside CCDF funds for construction or major renovation? Grantees can use construction and major renovation as an opportunity to reduce or eliminate wait lists. Another thing to consider during planning is there a need for future expansion? And should you design a facility that takes into account? Now let's think about record keeping and as all of your CCDF fund, it is important to have good reporting, good record keeping and reporting processes in place. With a construction major renovation project, additional record keeping and reporting requirements come into play. How will you keep your record of the construction major renovation expenditures and report them to the Office of Child Care on their 696T? Deciding on this process during the planning phase will help keep your finance department on track. Again, we just ask that you continue to use the chat box if you have any questions. Here's a sample of the OLDC website and a form to gain access. If you have not filled out one or need to update your information, this is what it looks like. Now let's think about record keeping and reporting. As with all of your CCDF fund, again, it is still important to keep records and reporting processes in place. With construction major renovation project, again, that reporting requirements is very important. How will you keep your records? How will you continue to keep expenditures and be able to report that to the Office of Child Care? Next. We also want to include a sample of the SF429. Tribal lead agency proposing to use CCDF funds for construction major renovation must submit this real property status report, which is the SF429 cover page, and attachment B, which is called Request to Acquire, Approve, or Furnish. In the Grant Solutions online data collection, again, is the OC system. In the next slide, you will be able to access the program instruction on the SF429. And there of the information. Tribal CCF grantees proposing to use, again, construction major renovation must submit these forms: the SF429 cover page, the SF429B, which again is the acquire, approve, or furnish. The program instruction for that is there, and also to be able to submit that in any information on the online data system. Next. Here's a sample of the 696T form. This report is to document both your CCDF mandatory and discretionary funds for each grant year that is awarded. Tribes are required to use the ACF 696T to report expenditures of tribal mandatory, discretionary, construction, and major renovation funds issued under CCDF. Expenditure period should correspond with the federal fiscal year beginning October 1st and ending September 30th. Column D is where you will report construction and major renovation, tribal mandatory funds, and column E, construction and major renovation, tribal discretionary funds. For additional information referring to 696T, there is a program instruction that is available for completing this form. Mandatory and discretionary funds used for construction major renovation have no separate obligation requirement. Tribal lead have up to 3 years to liquidate funds approved for use on construction or major renovation. So for example, if funds are awarded October 1st of 2019, you must be able to liquidate that by 9/30 of 2022. Liquidation periods begin with the date and funds that are originally awarded, not the date that the funds are transferred to the separate award for construction and major renovation. So tribes that have consolidated childcare with employment and training program are 102-477. Funds can be carried forward without obligation or liquidation period. Again, if you have any questions, do let us know here in the chat box, as well as we will have those office hours where you can come and join us. And if you have specific questions around any of this information that's being provided, that would be a great time for us to have a one-on-one conversation. So thank you, and I'll go ahead and turn this over to Melody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dee. That's really helpful information. So we're putting some resources that Dee mentioned in the chat box. So be sure to click on those links and keep your questions coming. So our next internal system is the Fiscal Management system. And this system will help with planning by providing information on the funding levels, current obligations, and fiscal policies and procedures. Within this system, you'll determine who will manage the set-aside amount for construction or major renovation projects. You'll also consider the operation and liquidation periods in the funds that you're planning to set aside. And let's talk a little bit more about fiscal considerations in the following slides. So first, your pre-planning activities include preparing application components and developing plans and specifications. And these are all considered planning costs. A tribal lead agency may, without prior ACF approval, use CCDF funds for reasonable and necessary planning and consultant costs associated with assessing the need for construction or major renovation or for preparing an application to spend CCDF funds on construction or major renovation. These costs could include the cost of hiring an architect to develop plans and specifications. And a tribal aid agency may only use CCDF funds to pay for the costs of an architect, engineer, or other consultant for a project that is subsequently approved by ACF. If the project later fails to gain ACF approval, the tribal lead agency must pay for the architectural, engineering, or consultant costs using non-CCDF funds. There's no threshold amount on the planning costs identified. This will be an amount that the tribal lead agency decides, and this should be included in your set-aside request amount. Once ACF approves the application for construction or major renovation, then a retroactive adjustment must be made to charge these costs to the separate construction and major renovation grant award. And so for more information on planning costs, you'll find that details in section 5 of the program instruction, and definitely reach out to your program specialist in your regional office for more information. So here is where we talk about cost allocation plans, like we mentioned earlier. I know I saw some questions in the chat. So a cost allocation plan is a document that identifies, tracks, and calculates costs that are across the agency. So a budget is a document that plans, categorizes, and tracks CCDF program expenses. So a cost allocation plan is different from your CCDF program budget. And just curious, do any of you have a current cost allocation plan in place? If so, you could give us a thumbs up by using the reactions button in the Zoom screen. Just wanted to see if any of you, or you can type yes into the chat box if you have a current cost allocation plan. So cost allocation plans are an important part of your overall fiscal management system, and these assist you in identifying shared costs with another program. So for example, a common example might be that CCDF is sharing a facility with a Head Start program, and both programs are responsible for paying the utilities, the maintenance, snow removal, etc. And so you would want to develop a cost allocation plan based on how much of the expense each grant will incur. So when you're developing a cost allocation plan, you'll want to identify the service and the cost of each service to be allocated. So your utilities, your maintenance, whatever those other items are. You'll also want to determine the method unit for allocating the cost of each service to each program. So in our example, if it's the CCDF program and Head Start, you would want to determine how are you going to allocate those costs. Are you going to use a percentage amount? Are you going to use another method? And then you'll want to allocate the costs by mathematically figuring out which costs are allocated to which program. So if you're using a percentage, then you would just do a quick calculation to determine how much of each cost each program will be responsible for. For example, if your program uses 40% of the square footage of a building and Head Start is using 60% of a building, then you could use those percentages to allocate the shared costs to each respective grant. And so we have a few more examples of cost allocations here on this slide. So if your construction project is going to benefit more than one program, the cost of construction must be allocated to all programs involved. So for instance, if you're considering to construct a building that will house 3 childcare classrooms, 2 Head Start classrooms, and 4 offices that are occupied by, say, your childcare administrator, your Head Start director, a childcare intake worker, a Head Start family advocate, a childcare and Head Start health coordinator, and a kitchen, then your costs could be allocated as follows. And so here you have the rows on the screen. You have the childcare classrooms, the Head Start classrooms, and then you have the administrator. So you have your staff office space. And so you can see these are just hypothetical example amounts of potentially using this example of 40% and 60% of the square footage. And this is just an example of a cost allocation. And we're just using Head Start in this example because we know Head Start is a pretty common partner for CCDF, but some of you might have other partners, like maybe you share space with the AOA or elder program, or maybe you share space with the state pre-K program. Or maybe you have a tribal immersion program that you share space with. So those are all other, examples. You can certainly partner with other programs within your tribe. So just wanted to mention, this is just an example, just to kind of have you have a visual representation of what could be possible. So let's see here. We just wanted to also mention that many times Head Start or other early childcare programs do not have funds to assist with a construction project up front. So one example could be that CCDF could pay for the construction of a facility, and then Head Start or other programs could rent space from the CCDF program in that facility once the project is completed, and then cost allocate expenses according to the cost allocation plan. And so that type of cooperative planning can really assist you in completing component number 13 of your construction and major renovation application. So that's just an example. So here on the screen, we wanted to talk a little bit about your projected total cost. So additional information is needed for cost allocation of a construction or major renovation project, and is a projected cost of the project. So let's talk through this example here on the screen. So in your projected total cost, you'll need to include two categories of costs. The first will be one-time costs that are estimated, and then the next would be an estimate of ongoing costs. So on the top part of the screen, let's talk about what could be considered estimated one-time costs. So you see the number 1 there, you have planning costs. And then you have the number 2 there that says labor, materials, and services. And then you have number 3, which is initial equipment for the facility. So these are all considered estimated one-time costs. Under number 1 for planning costs, you can see in this hypothetical example, some potential costs. So in this example, this particular lead agency has identified an architect as part of their planning that has an amount of $10,800. They've also identified a planning and project manager at $25,500. You have office staff, personnel fringe benefits, plumbing and mechanical design, electrical, and blueprints, with a total planning cost of $64,150. And then under number 2, you have your labor, materials, and services. And under there, you have a one-time cost estimation of labor needed and materials and services. And then for initial equipment, these, again, one-time costs for this example includes renting equipment like a bulldozer, a bobcat, other small equipment to actually complete your project. And they have this projected at 36 months at $500 a month for a total of $18,000. So those are your estimated one-time cost examples. The next part in B, your ongoing costs, you also need to project what is it going to cost to operate that facility once all your construction is complete and it's up and running. So you'll need to estimate staffing costs. So if you have 3 childcare classrooms in your new facility, how many teachers are you going to need? How many cooks? How many staff? And so you'll need to provide ACF with an estimate. And so here on this, you have an example of salaries and benefits per year. Also, you'll need supplies. You'll need supplies to basically make sure that the classrooms and all of your facilities are operational. Perhaps you need insurance premiums. You might have maintenance costs as part of it, or maybe property taxes. So you'll want to make sure that you're including in your projected total cost your ongoing costs to operate that facility. And again, this is all just an example. And if you would like additional information, we encourage you to look at component number 11 in the application packet in the program instruction. And we're going to go through all the components of the application itself in the next webinar. So this is just to kind of get you thinking in this planning process. So with that, we have a question for you. So what can your approved CCDF funds for construction and major renovation pay for? So given all the things that we've talked about so far, just wanted to hear from you what your funds could be paid for. And so here on the screen, you'll see a poll question pop up. And you have planning costs, environmental assessment, consultant costs, architect, project planner, purchase of a modular unit, new and ongoing projects, and all of the above. I see we have some responses coming in. Let's see, we have a lot of ideas here. So it looks like majority of you are saying all of the above. And yes, that's accurate. You can certainly use your approved CCDF funds for all of the above costs. And again, you would want to think about whether those costs are part of your one-time planning costs or your estimated ongoing costs. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for participating in this poll. Great. And so now we're going to go ahead and move on to our next part. So now that we've examined all of the inner slices of the third ring of the framework, and now that you've considered information from all of these different internal systems, you'll be ready to gather all that information and give that to the CCDF administrator in the second ring of the CCDF Program Management, Planning, Integrity, and Accountability. So you'll see the arrow there with the second ring. Here is where the CCDF administrator will share this information with the planning group, and they can use that information gathered to make an informed choice of whether or not to move forward with minor renovation, major renovation, or construction. So we have another question for you. So given all this information on pre-planning, what pre-planning steps has your CCDF program started? And so we're going to ask that you please select the options that you've already completed. So here on the screen, you'll have a poll question, and your options are: I've read the program instruction, I've contacted the regional office, I've completed an assessment of the childcare needs in your community, and I've begun the environmental assessment. And some of you indicated in our previous discussions, you have some really good ideas on where you could start to get started in this planning process. And it looks like the majority of you are indicating that you've read the program instruction. And that is wonderful news. That's a great place to start. Just reading that program instruction will help you to frame discussions as you start reaching out to all of your internal and external partners. And it looks like the second most responses was, I have contacted the regional office. And that is also a really good place to start. We highly recommend involving your program specialist as soon as you're thinking about construction or major renovation, so you can kind of talk through what it is you want to accomplish for your program. All right. It looks like our responses have slowed down. So thank you so much for all of those responses in our poll question. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Shar for our next part. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Melody. So tribal lead agencies have an opportunity to include child-focused and culturally appropriate elements into their construction or major renovation project. They're encouraged to think strategically about their architectural and landscape designs to incorporate those elements as well. Before you begin thinking about submitting a partial application, it's good to know what category your project is. So we're going to discuss the two construction and major renovation categories. So a tribe could request construction, which means the building of a child care facility that does not currently exist. And this request will require a completed application. You could also consider major renovation projects. Major renovation involves structural changes to the foundation, roof, floor, exterior, or load-bearing walls of a facility, or the extension of a facility to increase its floor area. Major renovation also includes any extensive alteration of a facility, such as to significantly change its function and purpose, even if such renovation does not include any structural changes. So for example, if you decide to use a previous restaurant in your community that's no longer in use, maybe the tribe purchases the building, but it's moving from food service to a child care program, that would require a major renovation application, even if any of the structure of the facility is not being changed. So just wanted to give you a quick information about that. On the screen, you're going to see a few pictures of some minor renovations. One is a modular building where an addition has been put on. The second one is to increase floor space in a bathroom, moving some walls to install dividers, or possibly adding windows that didn't currently exist in some of your rooms. Could be a minor renovate or a major renovation based on those structural changes. And it's really important to speak with your regional office for clarification if you're not sure if the potential project is considered major renovation or minor renovation. They can help you sort through that. So another project that the tribal lead agencies could consider is purchasing a modular building, and an application would be required. A modular is a portable structure made at another location and moved to the site for the use by the tribal lead agency to carry out a CCDF program. For additional information, you can see section 13 of the program instruction, and that will give you some more information about modular units. You may request to use CCDF funds to pay for the cost of constructing or renovating a modular unit, including the cost of buying and installing the unit if the unit is fixed to the land. For example, placed on a foundation and permanently connected to the utility lines. If a tribal lead agency is requesting funds for these purposes, it must also provide a cost comparison of the life of the modular unit compared to the construction of a more permanent structure like a brick and mortar building. So there is that additional requirement to your application. Again, put your questions in the chat box. We'll keep moving and try to answer those as we go along. If a tribal CCDF grantee is interested in pursuing multiple construction or renovation projects, they must seek ACF approval for each separate project. Even if the projects use identical plans and specifications, a grantee may, however, use a single application to seek approval for more than one project as long as all of the required information is provided for each project. Just a reminder that each project will still need to be explained with plans, specifications, and the key features. So we have another poll question for you. This one is, have you determined the type of project you're going to be applying for? Would it be construction, major renovation, Or would it only be minor renovation without an application? We'll take a minute and let you answer the poll. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll. All right, it looks like most of you have determined that you're going to go forward with a construction project. A few of you are going to do major renovations, and 5% of you have decided that you could do minor renovations. So glad to hear it. All right, next slide. So on the screen, you're going to see possible timelines for planning your construction and major renovation projects. On the top section, highlighted in the grayish blue color, is a timeline for a single year funded project using construction or major renovation set aside of CCDF funds from one fiscal year. In the lower portion of the chart, it demonstrates a possible multi-year project. This type of project will draw from more than one fiscal year of the set aside to complete the project. And some projects involve more funding than it is available in one fiscal year. In that case, grantees can request funding from more than one fiscal year. Tribal lead agencies must request that in their application. A multi-year project can be approved in one single application. This chart also shows possible activities that are taking place within each fiscal year. All right, we have a couple more poll questions for you. So those of you who have kind of made up your mind on construction or major renovation, what CCDF funds are you planning to request to set aside from? Your normal fiscal year 2021 mandatory, or your discretionary, or from CURSA funding? And then which grant years are you planning to set aside CCDF funds for construction or major renovation? Grant year 2021 only, or more years, or more funding sources? All right, let's go ahead and close the poll. So it looks like 63% of you are going to be applying for CURSA funding. And again, as if you notice in the chat box, if you're using CURSA funds, that application would also be due on July 1st of 2021. And some of you are using discretionary and some are using mandatory funds. And then 37% said just grant year 2021 and 63% said more. Thank you. With that, we have one more slide for me. If you have any questions, keep typing those into the chat box. If we do not get to your questions during this presentation, we will definitely follow up in our follow-up email, and also have those available to discuss during our office hours. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Dee.
Thank you, Shar, for all that information. And thank you, everyone, for those questions. They are absolutely great questions. Just want to, again, let you do have office hours. Those are going to be scheduled in June on the 10th, the 17th, the 24th, and the 29th. So those are great opportunities for you to come and join us. And again, if we have not answered your question in a follow-up email, those are a great opportunity to join us and have some discussion around some questions that you will be having as you are pre-planning and planning to set aside your funding. And the reason for June is because application for 2021 funding is due by July 1st. So we want to make sure that you all get that information in on time. So next, What's next? Begin your pre-application activities such as those planning costs, internal, external stakeholders, your partners, who's all going to be involved in that. Review that program instruction because it gives a whole list of all the application components that need to be filled out, and also have that discussion with your program specialist. Decide the amount of CCF funds that will be transferred from your CCDF funding, whether it's tribal mandatory, discretionary, or even possibly both. And also get that cover letter signed by your tribal leadership, identifying what you're going to be setting aside from your regular CCDF to be transferred over to construction major renovation. That is due July 1st. Conduct those community needs assessment and your environmental assessment. Again, those are great information that will help you arrive at what type of construction are we going to be doing? Is it going to be a major, huge facility? Is it something that you're just going to go and maybe identify a building and you want to do major construction around that? That is good information to get an assessment and needs assessment within your community. Gain access to your SF 429. Also take a look at your 696T report, information that is needed if you should decide to use construction major funding. It is also needing to be reported. Review and begin completing your items that are listed on the application checklist. If you read the program instruction, it's attachment D. That will be really helpful for you to take a look at that as well. Just to give you an opportunity to take a look at the application checklist, here it is. It contains a summary of the application requirements. It's also something you could use during your pre-planning to see information have you gathered, how much information is still needed so that you can complete this. And maybe some of you have started it since last year or even the year before, identifying whether you would like to set aside construction funding. So our next session, we'll go through those application components on that attachment D. Again, just want to let you see the process of the flow chart. It identifies activities and processes as the application is moving along and what will take place before, during, and after the process of your construction major renovation application. So we want to move along to our poll question and see where could you, tribal lead agency, go for help? All right. Great. And I do believe that many of you are indicating the regional office. I think that is an absolutely great place to start having a discussion with them, identifying what you're thinking about, list some ideas of what you might possibly be doing, because some of that may be considered minor renovation and that does not require an application. Maybe you might want to take a look at information that you've already gathered and share that with them as well. Thank you for participating in our poll. Looks like everyone knows to go ahead and reach out to the regional office. And that again is a very important piece to talk with your program specialists. Again, does anyone else have any questions? Just want to make sure that, again, the opportunity to talk through some of this information is during our office hours. We hope to see you all there. We do hope to have you all registered. Don't forget to use the link that was provided in our chat box. We also want your feedback. We want to know how much of this information on pre-planning session was very helpful for you to think strategically and also in advance of whether this is something you would like to take on within your program. And we did put the link in for the survey, so go ahead and click that on. That should take you over to the survey for your feedback. Do not forget program instructions, information that is available. There are some resources that can be very helpful for you to download and help you along with information such as your SF 429, 696T, as well as the program instructions. Here is our contact information. If you have any questions that you feel that you would like to ask, or if we may not have seen, do feel free to go ahead and send us an email and let us know what those questions are. We will loop in your regional office. Should we get any more questions, we'll make sure to contact your regional office as well to make sure that we are having good communication and helping and assisting and supporting you for TA support around construction major renovation. again, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us. We ask that you have a wonderful day, stay safe, and hope to see you on maybe one of our office hours if you have any questions.